Hey, welcome back to the Steel City Roundtable. Missed you folks, haven't talked to you in a while. Life has been busy. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're taking care of your mental health, and if you're in addiction or if you're struggling, hopefully you're taking care of all that stuff right now. Um, just to give you a little catch up on what's been going on with me. Working hard as always, getting close to 28 months sober. My wife Shelly and I have just started the immigration process for her to get her green card here in the U.S. She is from Mexico and she is doing what she's supposed to and following the rules. She's here legally, came through a port of entry, is documented, follows the rules, and as she should. Uh, you know, um, that's the way it's supposed to be done. So we're dealing with that right now, and I just got myself a toy. I got myself a brand new Toyota Tundra to celebrate me being sober. Big gift for myself. I think I've earned it. Hopefully you guys think so too. But if you don't, tough shit, because you know me, I do what I want. Um, but yeah, so life is good. Everything's been going good for us. The house is good. The dogs are good. The job is good. We're just trucking along. Um, but what I want to talk about today is how in early sobriety, and by early sobriety, I'm probably talking the first 5 years, um, a lot of things happen throughout our recovery that we either don't expect or we're not planning on, or, it strikes us in a weird way or brings up triggers. So I want to talk about a situation that I dealt with recently that threw me for a loop for a while and made me kind of rethink where I was in my recovery. So, we bought the house back in March and I wanted to put a fence in because we have two dogs and we want the dogs to be able to run around and not have to, walk them every day and just let them go outside and do their thing. So I was getting estimates and talking to a bunch of companies, and, the estimates were coming in between, I'd say 6,000 and 11,000 for a wooden fence. It says like 220 linear feet. So I'm thinking, it's a little expensive, but it's a fence and prices have gone up and inflation and all that crap. So uh, I came across this one gentleman, young kid, 23 years old. He just started his own business about a year ago, doing home improvements, fences, decks, all that type of thing. So I found his number on Angie's List. And I'm going to tell you now, Angie's List is junk. Uh, I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw them. And I'll tell you why. Um, so I reached out to this guy, didn't know anything about him, started talking to him on the phone, and got a good feeling for him. He said that he's 23, just started his own business, and he loves what he does. He lets his work stand alone, as in, he puts his money where his mouth is, and he does all the hard work, and he puts out a good product. He talked about how he puts his warranty behind it. If anything goes wrong or there's any issues, he'll come out and fix it. His crews are hardworking. He's dedicated to forming this business. And I was really impressed by the way he spoke. He sounded like a very mature 23-year-old, coming from a 51-year-old who was a total jackass when he was 23, take it for what it's worth. So I thought about it for a little bit and I decided I was going to get the fence done by this kid. So, he estimates the price, says it's going to take a week. He's going to get out there, he's going to pound it out. And then, if there's anything wrong, he's going to come back and take care of it. So, first day he shows up, 8 o'clock in the morning. He brings two laborers. We have a conversation for about 15 minutes and then he leaves because basically, for all intended purposes, he's a CEO and he's a laborer and he's the contractor and he's the designer and he's the jack of all trades. So he had to go be a foreman on another job. So I was like, all right, cool. So his two laborers here for about 8 hours. And I'm thinking there was probably about, I don't know, 20, 25 post holes that had to be dug down to about 3 feet. And, uh, you know, when these guys got done after 8 hours, there was like 6 holes in the ground. Now, as I said before, my wife, she's an amazing person, but she doesn't do manual labor and she doesn't do hard labor. But I'm pretty sure, I can guarantee it, that if I put her out there with a post hole digger and some shovels and a tape measure she could get more done in a day than these jackasses did. All they wanted to do is sit out there and talk all day long and, have fun like this wasn't work, and we'll get into my opinion on that later. So I'm like, okay, I'm not impressed, but it's early. It's first day. So he comes back the next day, same thing, shows up. He brings 3 guys with him. He leaves after we have a little conversation. He tells me what he's going to get done, what they're going to get done that day, and, puts out the game plan. Well, this day went worse than the first. The one guy was this tatted up guy, and being an ex-cop, you know, I told my wife when I saw this guy, I was like, this guy's a convict. Like he's probably using drugs. I mean, he just looks strung out. Uh, and lo and behold, at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, he had to leave to go to drug court. I guess 12 years working as a cop didn't totally uh, go to the wayside when I left because, I pegged it in a heartbeat. So this guy leaves and he's basically worthless for the day. And then the other 2 guys were a little bit harder working, so they got more work done. So I was like, okay, cool. We'll see what happens the next day. And I just keep taking it day by day. And every day there's a delay, or there's a guy can't show up, or it's raining and they're not going to work in the rain, or something else came up. They had to fix something at another job. So lo and behold, this 1 week job turns out to be 2 weeks long, right? So, I mean, as a consumer, you know, let me rephrase this. As a man in this world, you're judged on a lot of different things. But the number one thing that I judge another man on, and I try to judge myself by the same rule, is a true man is someone who, when they make a promise or a commitment, they fulfill that commitment no matter what. Your word, your promise, your actions, they all matter. So, at this point, I'm a little pissed because it's taken them a lot longer to get it done. So, like I said, the calling off, not showing up, it was a disaster. So he finally gets the fence done 2 weeks in, a week later than he was supposed to. And, I go take a quick look at the fence and it looks okay. I mean, it looks good from, just looking at it from a distance. But then I noticed that he only put 2 horizontal supports. On top of that, there was a lot of very long spans between the posts. I'm talking 8 feet, 8.5 feet. There's one that was over 10 feet. And from what I know of fence building, from what I've been told from the other people that I've talked to, a normal span in a wooden fence is going to be between 6 and 8 feet. That way it maintains stability, right? It doesn't flex a whole lot, and it's just going to be a more stable. It's going to uphold in bad conditions, and it's just going to last you longer. So I asked him, I'm like, why are there only 2 supports? Why didn't you put 3 in? And he's like, well, I give people an option, whether they want 2 or 3. Oh, you didn't give me an option. You didn't ask me if I wanted 2 or 3. You just built the fence. And I put my faith in you because I was at work the whole time you were building the fence. So I'm not hanging around watching, you know? And then there's some other things wrong with it. Nothing major, but like, no big deal. He's like, we'll come back out. We'll do it. You're just going to pay for the materials. I was like, fine, man. It's going to be like $500. No big deal. So, I have a little bit of time in between that day and the next time I talk to him. So I get to take a better look at the fence. That was just a bad idea. I should have just not looked at it. I mean, I walked around and kicked the bottom of the fence, and I was kicking boards out. They were coming loose. Where he put the 2x4s into the support beams, the posts where he, tacked it in to make it secure and frame the fence. I mean, literally, you had this much of the 2x4 actually touching the 4x4. So, they had the nails going on angles. There was nails that weren't even in the fence. Boards are cracked. There's pickets that don't even have any nails in them at the bottom or at the top at all. One was just flapping around in the wind, and as he got further around the fence, it got worse because you can tell where he started and where he finished. And where he finished, it was just a mess, crooked boards, no nails. I could go on for days about how just retarded this was. So, I call him up and I'm like, hey man, listen, you guys gonna come out here and fix my fence? He's like, yeah. We're just a little busy right now. When you gonna be around? And, we go through this text thing back and forth. And I'm like, yeah, well, listen, there's a couple other things I don't like, man. Some boards came loose and this and that. And I'm not really, I mean, I'm frustrated, but I'm not really worried at this point because I'm like, this guy's going to come out and he's going to fix his fence. He warranties his work. That's when the total fuck off, blow you off shit starts, where, you know, he tells me he's going to show up. He doesn't show up. He stops responding to text messages. Then he stops answering the phone and goes straight to voicemail. So I'm not going to lie. When I was drinking and I wasn't taking care of myself, I was one asshole you didn't want to deal with because if you screwed me over, I was coming for blood right away. I was, threatening to take you to court and threatening to, badmouth you on social media and ruin your reputation and just destroy you, take you apart piece by piece. And I was trying not to do that. But like I said before, once you blow me off and give me the double barrel fuck you, that changes. Then I'm coming for blood. So I told the kid, I was like, listen, get your little ass out here and fix this fence or I'm going to take you to court. And, at this point, I'm just fuming over it. Like it's just resonating in my brain. I can't get this situation out of my head. It's dictating my behaviors. I'm getting snippy with my wife. I'm yelling at the dogs. Like I turned into the person I used to be. So I'm sitting there, this is probably a week and a half, 2 weeks after we started this whole deal about fixing a fence. And at this point, I can't stop thinking about it. Like I'm manic over it. And I really had to sit down and start thinking, like, what am I mad about? Like, what is really pissing me off? Is it the fact that the kid didn't build the fence right? Is it the fact that he's not answering my phone calls and he's not following up and he's not, upholding his word? Yeah, those things are a big part of it. But as I started thinking about it more and more and more, I started thinking about the things that I used to do when I was drinking. And very quickly, I realized that I was, it was bringing up all kinds of feelings that I didn't expect to have. So I'll give you some backstory, about me. I was that guy that said and did whatever I had to get my booze. And I would lie to you. I would tell you empty promises. I would say I'm going to do something and not do it. I would give you my word I was going to do something and I wouldn't do it. I would have to, my buddy would call me and say, hey, I need to work on my deck this weekend, whatever. Yeah, I'll be there. And then the day comes up, I'm hungover, I sleep till 3 o'clock, I'm not answering your phone calls. And then I call you 6 hours later and I'm like, hey, bro, I'm sorry, man, I had to go to work. They called me in. And it's just a bold-faced lie. And I'm sure they knew it because everybody knew I drank, but nobody knew how bad it was. But they just got used to this behavior where I became very undependable. I just wasn't there. Um, another example, my ex-wife, who I don't like, we don't talk. And I remember there was she wanted to build a retaining wall in the backyard of our house. And for about a year, I kept saying, yeah, we'll get to it, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. And I just didn't really give a shit. I mean, I didn't care. I didn't want to do it. So I just didn't start the project. So I come home one day from work and her dad's out there in the backyard digging ditches. He's got a, you know, Ford pickup truck with the bed full of Versalock blocks. And this 71-year-old guy's out there just about having a fucking stroke in the heat doing this because I didn't. And, that was just how I was. I said I would do something and I wouldn't do it. And then I start thinking about it even more and it starts going back to my police career. The last 3 years I spent in narcotics and vice, and I had two partners. And I worked with these guys every day. We rode in a car together, we did our reports together, we did operations together, like it was us three all the time. And I remember there was an incident where we had to use force and it would kind of turn into a clusterfuck. And, I wasn't there 100%. I missed some things, I was slow to respond, slow to react. I wasn't on top of my game. I mean, it could have gone south. It didn't, luckily, but it could have gone really, really bad. And we got back to the barn headquarters and my partner looks at me. He goes, listen, man, like, I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but you need to get your shit together because you're going to get me killed. I can't work with you until you figure your shit out. You know, and that started making me think, like, you know, I was drinking every day. I was drinking a lot. Wasn't drinking before work, wasn't drinking at work, but I would drink all night and, pass out with like 8 hours before I had to get up. So, I was hungover at work every day. And, my wife had been telling me to slow down on my drinking. A couple of my friends had been saying to slow down on my drinking. And I told them the same thing. I'm like, listen, don't worry. I'm slowing down. I'm going to cut back. I'm going to get my shit together. It's going to be all good, man. I got it handled. But when my partner told me that, let me tell you what, folks, when you're deep in addiction, it takes some God moments, some realization moments, some oh shit moments to get your head out of your ass. And this was back in 2017 when this happened, and I went and got help. It wasn't because of what my wife said. It wasn't because of what my friend said. It was because what my partner said. Because in that job, I was supposed to have his six 24/7. He always had mine, and I didn't have his. I wasn't giving him the best of me at my job. I was probably operating at about 50%. So I went and got help. I did what I needed to do. And of course, the department I worked for, they determined that I wasn't sick enough to get the full treatment. So, they cut it short and said that if you want to keep going, you got to pay for it yourself. And I'm like, well, I mean, I feel good. I'm sober. I feel good. I got a handle on this. So continue on, maybe 3 months later, I'm still sober. I'm still doing okay. I'm feeling good, and we do an operation, where, for example, a lot of departments, they'll give you an expenditure account where you do operations, you go to bars, restaurants, hotels, whatever. And you do surveillance, or say you got a person that's got a warrant there and you're staking out the business to try to see him come in so you can pick him up, or you got complaints about this bar being a nuisance bar, so you go in and watch, but you got to fit in. So they would give you this money and say, don't spend it like an idiot, but go out there and fit in. So, you'd have a drink, or, if you went to a strip bar and were doing a strip detail, you'd give the girls money because you had to fit in. And like I said, I'm like 3 months sober at the time, and I'm sitting there going, I feel pretty good, like, but I don't fit in. I'm just sitting here at the bar drinking water and Diet Pepsi. Everybody's got to know that I don't belong here. And this is my logical, illogical, addict brain saying, you know what? You should just have a drink, because if you have a drink, you're going to look like you belong here and you're going to fit in. And that's the only way I knew how to fit in at a bar, was to drink. So I got a drink. Been sober for 3 months, no problems. Life was good. And so I have that drink, and we go back to the barn at the end of the shift and we turn in our expenditure reports, and my boss sees, this for drinks. He's like, "What'd you have to drink?" And I was like, "Well, I had a a vodka and club soda, or whatever the fuck it was." He's like, "What are you doing?" You know, and that's because when I decided to get help, I told my supervisor that I was an alcoholic and that I needed to get help. So everybody in the office knew that I was an alcoholic. So he was pissed because I had a drink and I'm a recovering alcoholic. And rightfully so. He should have just knocked me out right then and there. But, I got screamed at for a bit, and it changed my relationship with my boss, because from that point on, he was watching me. He was watching me because he didn't trust me anymore. Like, I blew that bridge up, and I wasn't going to get that trust back ever. Um, but I mean, these are the things I did. I told everybody around me that I was sober and I was doing the right things. My coworkers, my partners, my boss, my friends, my family. Everybody heard the words, but I didn't back it up with actions, because I only stayed sober for 2 or 3 months, and then I had a drink. You know, and other than getting yelled at by my boss, I didn't think it was a big deal. I was like, I had a drink, nothing happened. Like, I was good. Like, I could probably have another drink. So I did. So I'll go out a couple times a week after work, have a drink or two, sometimes three, you know, not get drunk, go home. And when I would get home, I would be pissed off all the time. I'd be grumpy and angry and just bitter. And I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. So I had a bad day and I was just like, you know what? I'm good. I can get drunk and I'll be fine. I won't do what I was doing before. So I go to the bar and I get hammered and I come home and I feel great. Sleep like a old lady at a nursing home. I'm out cold. Great sleep. Feel great the next day. Wake up a little hungover, but I'm like, I'm cool. I feel great. And that was it. 6 years later, I wanted to put a bullet in my mouth. It's that easy to get back into the addiction. It's that easy to fall from the righteous path and go down that dark hallway again. And this is just a couple of the things that I did when I was a cop that were dumb. I mean, like I said, I drank all the time. I was always hungover. Um, but back to the reason why I started this conversation, you know, being mad at that kid, it triggered me in a way that I didn't expect, on just like a base human level. Like, who am I? Kind of shit. And, it made me think. It made me remember the things that I haven't been thinking about, the things that I kind of put in the background and just didn't pay attention to anymore. Because, I got sober. I'm like, hey, I'm sober now. Like, that's not me anymore. Like, I am, I got a clean slate. Well, that's some horse shit if you say that to yourself and you believe it. Because you don't get a clean slate. What you get is you get a reprieve. You get a chance to make things right. But there's no expiration date on your stupidity. There is no, this never happened. God in the universe say, hey, you know what, Mark? You got sober. We're so happy for you. You get a clean slate. All your sins are forgiven, and you never hurt anybody. So, we're gonna give you a pass. Just a pass. It doesn't work that way. We carry those bad decisions, the bad behavior, the immoral activities. We carry that with us for the rest of our lives. It never goes away. The only thing we can hope is that we take that daily reprieve and we just do the next best thing every time we have a decision to make. you know so thinking about all these things after this kid screwed me over, and I realized I wasn't so much mad at him. I mean, I was irritated, I was upset. I felt bad because I put myself out there, I gave this kid a chance knowing he had some issues, you know doing the good thing and supporting someone who has potential, and he screwed me over. But I realized I was indirectly mad at him. I was more angry and disgusted with myself for the person that I was and the things that I had done and the way I had treated relationships. I didn't give a fuck about anybody but myself. I didn't care about my wife. I didn't care about my dogs. I didn't care about my friends. All I wanted to do is drink and forget everything that was bothering me. So I destroyed every relationship. Everyone that I was involved in, I did damage to that I can never fix. You know, when we're sober, we have to take responsibility for what we've done and who we were if we want to become the person that we think we can be. We don't just walk away from that portion of our life with no damage and no responsibility and no consequence. We may get lucky and not kill anybody in a car accident. We may get lucky and not kill ourselves. We may get lucky and, not get divorced because, you fuck everything up. But it doesn't mean that you're okay. We can get away with a lot as an alcoholic or an addict. We're good at it. You know, we could do whatever we want because we're so goal oriented that we can turn any situation advantageous for us, no matter who we step on to do it. And thinking back on those things, even today, it's been, a couple weeks since this whole thing went down, that really put me in a bad place mentally. It brought me back to where I was before I went to rehab. It brought me back to where I was for the last, 6 years before I went to rehab. It brought me back to the night where I was going to kill myself, and all these bad feelings came back. And to be honest with you, I was so surprised for a couple reasons. Number one, I can't believe it took 27 months for that to happen. You know, I had been living a blessed life as a recovering alcoholic, maybe a couple times had the urge to drink, but never did, and never had any major like setbacks, if you want to use that word, until now. And, you know, It was really a disgusting way to live my life, to not care about any relationship I had. I am so lucky now that the friends that I have had for years and years and years, the same friends I was screwing over, have stuck by me and have supported me and have, pushed me in the right direction when I do have rough days. I've been blessed to meet my wife and, get to spend my life with her and get to marry her and, the privilege of marrying her. These things have happened in my life that are amazing. And then this whole situation happened, and it took one situation to make me think about having a drink. Like, seriously contemplate having a drink. If you're an alcoholic or an addict, the relapse doesn't happen when you take that drink or do that drug. The relapse happens when we start considering the idea that we can do that again and be okay and not fall into the same destructive patterns. Once you hit that stage, you're already in relapse. So you're already behind the eight ball, and you got to do some major fucking self work to get back out of that, to make sure you don't fall into that pattern again. So, long story short, I know I'm long-winded, but this whole situation, it made me question where I was in my recovery. It made me question where I was with my mental health. It made me question whether or not I have made any progress in becoming the person that I want to be and that I think I can be. I am still a work in process. I am a project with the outcome yet to be determined. I think I'm better than I was. I think I make better decisions. I think I handle situations more logically and reasonably now and with less emotion. But this whole situation was driven by emotion. And if you're anything like me, you know that emotion is not exactly the place you want to live. Emotion drives a lot of our behavior. The whole idea of cognitive behavioral therapy, inputs our entire lives. We experience these situations and these things, and they have a profound effect on us. And then after time, we associate, a situation with an emotional response. And then after time, we associate that input with the emotional response. And then the result is we drink because we've trained ourselves to drink over these things. Get in a fight with your girlfriend, you panic, you get anxiety, you get depressed. So you drink. You do that enough times, that becomes your standard MO. That becomes your operating procedure. That's your programming, and the only way to break that is to reprogram yourself through, you know, self-awareness, therapy, meditation, whatever you have to do that's going to dig into the character flaws, and not just what the flaw is, but what the flaw is, how you exercise behaviors related to that flaw, what the outcomes are, why you do it, and how you can stop doing it. you know, and that's a lot of work. Someone who's not an alcoholic or an addict, you're not going to understand how difficult this could be for us because you don't have to do it on a daily basis. Normal people respond logically and don't make the dumb decisions that we do because they're not drunk or they're not chasing a drug. You know, Sober people go through the same problems as addicts in addiction. The difference is that, in my opinion, addicts, when they're in their addiction, we run on emotion. Bottom line, everything has an emotional attachment to us. Every input gets assigned an emotion, and that becomes our standard operating procedure. So, think of it as a computer. You know, Windows is designed to work a certain way. The only way that program changes the way it works if someone goes back in there and redoes the design of that program. And that's what we have to do as alcoholics and addicts. We have to reprogram how we operate. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. If you want to know the stuff I do, meditate, go to the gym, breathing techniques, try to get 8 hours of sleep, try to eat less crappy food, talk to my friends that were in rehab, do this podcast, go to an AA meeting when I need to. Like, there's a ton of things that I do, and the best way to put it, and this is what one of the counselors at my rehab, Clyde, told us. He said, you have to have a warrior's plan. And at the time, I didn't know what a warrior's plan was. I just figured it's like, just plan how you're going to stay sober, right? Like, real simple. But a warrior plan is our structured recovery plan that we are going to implement in order to fight our war against addiction. And folks, don't be naive. Battling addiction and mental health is a fucking war. It's a war of attrition. He who fights the hardest and longest wins. And let me tell you what, the devil, addiction, has unlimited resources. No matter how long you live on this earth, that disease will always try to find its way back to your internal core, to who you are, and take you over again, because the disease wants to kill you. It wants you dead. It wants to ruin everything in your life so that you don't have a reason to be here anymore. And that's what a warrior's plan is. A warrior's plan is, for me, it was taking a notebook, a day planner, and I scheduled out everything I was going to do that day, focusing on the things that I'm going to do to improve my life and further my recovery. So an example would be like, 8 o'clock, eat breakfast. 9 o'clock, go to an AA meeting. 10 o'clock, go to the gym. Noon, eat lunch. 1, go to an AA meeting. 4 o'clock, go to therapy. 6 o'clock, eat dinner. 8 o'clock, go to an AA meeting. I mean, that was my day. My day had at least 4 to 5 different AA meetings listed, so that I knew if I missed this one, I could go to this one. If I missed this one, I could go to this one. But I went to 3 to 4 every day for the first 30 days. And I tell you what, if I didn't do that, I would have fell off the wagon, because I needed the structure. I needed to be held accountable for my actions. And the only person that was going to hold me accountable was me. And I was so down to stay sober. I was so focused on staying sober that I did hold myself accountable. And, did I slip sometimes and not go? Yeah. But 90% of the time, I followed this plan of what I was going to do. The other components, like I said, were meditation, breath works, yoga, going to the gym, journaling, all kinds of different things that I still do to this day. Now, my warrior plan has evolved since I first got sober. I don't go to 3 meetings a day anymore. I don't have to plan everything out like I did before, because now it's ingrained in me what I need to do and what I want to do with my day. And it starts off by being grateful. Not just being grateful for being sober, but being grateful for the gifts that I've been given. Let me rephrase that. The gifts that I've earned, because nothing's given to you freely in this world. You got to earn it. And the same thing in recovery. You have to earn your successes. You have to earn your rewards. You have to earn the love of your friends and your family. You have to earn the respect of the people that you've screwed over. And that doesn't come back to you tenfold. I mean, you got to struggle to get every little piece of that back. And it's not easy, It's a daily struggle. Sometimes by the minute, sometimes by the hour. It depends on where your head's at. But the moral of the story is that, we don't just start over free and clear. We have our internal dumpster of garbage that we're going to have to deal with periodically throughout our lifetime, in recovery. And it's going to come up and hit you when everything's going great. Like for me, bought a house, looking at a new car, my dogs, building a fence, doing all these improvements on the house. I just got married to the most amazing woman on the planet, my partner for life. All these things. Work was great. Everything was at the pinnacle of what I thought I could never attain. So I was happy as a clam in mud. And then this happened, and it threw me for a loop. It put me back in the mindset of an alcoholic who wants to drink. Thank God I didn't. Thank God I didn't. thank God I had the support of my wife and my friends that I talked to. And, I was able to work through these things. But once again, it just hit me on such a deep level, like I said, the core of who I am. I have a lot of character flaws. You know, I do a lot of stupid shit. But one of the gifts I've been given in my recovery from working on me and trying to build a good life and do the next best thing and stay solid to my recovery was that I was given the gift of self-awareness. I spent the last 27 months trying to learn who I am. Listen, I'm not perfect. I'm kind of a shithead, but I'm a good person and I want to do good things. And the only way that I could do anything in my life now that is good is to understand why I did the things that I did. The motivation behind it. It wasn't just that I had PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Yeah, that was part of it. But, there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of, fear involved. There was a lot of insecurities involved in what I was doing. You know, Alcoholism makes all of those things worse. It feeds off of every negative characteristic you have and makes it bigger. And, the gift of being able to learn who I am as a person and gain some direction on where I want to go in the future as a person. Like I said, I'm a work in progress. There's nothing about me that's any different than any other alcoholic. You know, maybe the fact that I have a good job or, I have a house or I have a nice car or I have a great wife, yeah, that might make me different than some of you guys out there. But, the guy that sits on the highway with a brown paper bag begging for money, he and I are the same. At the core of who we are as an addict or an alcoholic, we are the same. You know, there's so many different types of people that are alcoholics and addicts. I mean, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, like it doesn't strike the weak. It doesn't strike the poverty stricken. It strikes everybody who allows it into their life. And unfortunately, I let it into my life at a very, very early age at 17 and spent the next 34 years drinking like an asshole and acting like I was the only person on the planet. You know? And, I guess when you come down to brass tacks, this discussion, this long-winded diatribe of mine, I want you guys to know who I am. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm proud of who I am because if I didn't do the things that I did, I wouldn't be able to do the things I'm doing now. I told my wife when I met her, I want you to like me because of who I am, not despite who I am. And thank God she makes bad decisions and she has low expectations because, I'm hitting out of my division right now. And I'm okay with it. She's so much better than I am. But thinking about recovery, like as you guys, those of you who are in recovery or thinking about trying to recover from your addiction, I mean, this is a war. This is a straight up dog eat dog, stab you in the eye with a bloody fucking knife war. And we have to be the ones that put in the work and fight harder and fight longer. And you just got to know that, coming out of rehab or coming out of detox, like nobody's going to tell you that life's going to suck sometimes. They're going to tell you, oh, you might have some rough days, it's going to be difficult, you may have, you may have the urge to drink or the compulsion to drink. But they don't tell you how bad it can get. They don't tell you how a little thing like some guy fucking you over on a fence could throw you in a tailspin for 2 weeks. They don't tell you that, just waking up one day in the morning, you could just feel like drinking and you have to fight all day to not drink. Nobody's going to give you the specifics because, all of our recoveries are different. But the golden rule is expect the unexpected, no matter what, when you're in recovery. Because you could be cruising along 65 in the hammer lane, smooth road, then you hit potholes and mountains and trees and you're fucked. So we as people in recovery have to become very mentally strong. And I think one of the components of being mentally strong is being self-aware. Because if we don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, it's not just that we do it, we have to know why. Because you can't fix it unless you know where the crack is. And for me, I had a lot of cracks. The mental health issues that were undiagnosed, that was a big part of it. But, insecurity, fear, easily angered, you know, lack of trust, abandonment issues, you name it, I probably dealt with it. Um, and this was this was a really rough time for me because it just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense that I was doing everything I thought was right, and then this popped up. So the lesson I learned was that it is a war. It's a war, and this shit's gonna happen when you don't expect it, and it could be the littlest thing that throws you into the biggest tailspin. So moving forward, if you think you drink too much, or if you want to go into recovery, you want to get sober, you want to deal with your mental health, like just realize that it's gonna be difficult, and the littlest thing can throw you off your rocker or not. You just don't know because it's such a dynamic disease. It affects you on so many levels: emotional, physical, mental, personal. It eats you alive, and it wants you dead, and it wants to destroy everything good in your life. And if you don't learn who you are, and if you don't accept who you are, good and bad, I don't think it's possible to stay sober and stay happy and stay healthy, because at some point the wall's going to crumble and you're going to be dealing with the same shit you dealt with before. The question is, are you capable? Have you followed your warrior plan? Have you built a good foundation of honesty, openness, trust, caring, selflessness, service work? Have you gotten all the components of the recipe together and made that work for you? And I'm here to say that, once again, I'm a work in progress, but my plan up until this whole thing was working just fine. So after this whole thing happened, I had to revamp my plan a little bit. I had to add a little bit, take a little bit out, and redesign my warrior plan because there was a crack in it. And that's going to happen. We're gonna deal with that forever, But as time goes on, as we've reprogrammed our operating system, we will get better at handling things logically and reasonably, and not eliminating emotion, but mitigating the risks of emotion. And by that, I just mean we'll be able to detach ourselves from the emotional frenzy that we want to go into and proceed using logical thought and reasoning through the problem. And that's an amazing thing when you can start doing that. And it doesn't come right away. Like I said, 27, almost 28 months sober, and I'm learning something new all the time about who I am. Like I just learned in the last 2 weeks that it doesn't take much to make me go nuts. It doesn't take much to bring me back to the negative thoughts, the isolation, the depression, the anxiety, the insecurities that I have. And I felt it was important for me to talk about this because I wish I would have seen a podcast like this when I got out of rehab, because it probably would have helped me understand a little bit more of some of the things that go on, some of the things I can face, because I came out just thinking, I just got to not drink today and everything's going to be fine. And that's not the way it works. Once again, you got to put the work in. If you don't work, it doesn't work for you. So, little takeaways for me is that I am still damaged. I am still broken, but I'm on the mend and I'm healing. And, taking that first step towards healing, going to rehab or admitting to a friend that you have a problem, that's just the beginning. Because all the hard work happens whenever you get home from detox, whenever you get home from rehab, if you're in the hospital, whenever you get home and you're outside that bubble where you can't get what you want, the drug or the alcohol. Once that bubble has been removed and you're exposed to the same environment, the same inputs, the same people, the same places, the risk is very high for a relapse, and thank God I've been lucky, and I'd like to say that some of it's because of what I do, but some of it's luck that I'm still here. I'm still sober. I'm still talking to you guys every chance I get. I'm still telling you about me so that, you can see that, just because I was a cop doesn't mean I was any better than anybody else. I was probably more fucked up than most, and you can turn it around. You got to have the faith in yourself. You got to have the openness and the willingness to fail and to learn from your failures and to build on every experience that you have and use those experiences to grow and to heal and to be a better person. Design a warrior plan. Have a structured plan on what you have to do to stay sober. And that plan is going to evolve over time. It's going to change a little bit here and there, but the nuts and bolts are going to stay the same. At least they have for me. So, I mean, that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight. So, granted, it's 4:20 in the morning, and I'm doing this after work, but you'll probably be getting a lot more stuff from me like this late at night. But I also am going to start doing some live stuff on Instagram and TikTok. I would love for you guys to interact because as of right now, I'm feeling pretty freaking lonely. Like nobody really comments, nobody really reaches out, and you know, I need to know if what I'm doing is good. I need to know if what I'm doing is helpful. If it's not doing anything, I want to know what you guys think. So reach out to me, SteelCityRoundtable@gmail.com. Got the website, SteelCityRoundtablePodcast.com. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, YouTube. So, just reach out to me. Tell me if anything I said hit home, or if you think I'm full of shit, or if there's something you want to talk about. And when I do these live things, hopefully you guys will jump on and we'll talk a little bit. But yeah, that's it, guys. I mean, I'm still a mess, but it's coming along. And I thank you guys for joining me in my journey. To all you guys that have been supporting me from the start, thank you so much. All the love in the world. And to those of you who are new to the show, thank you for checking us out. Hopefully, you'll watch some more and listen some more. But just remember, there's always a seat for you here at the round table, as the thumbs up says. And I love you guys, and you're all part of my family. So I can't wait for you guys to let me talk to you again.